Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says India keeping a watch on ties between Taliban and Pakistan. The article here is speaking about the existing relationship between Taliban and Pakistan, issues that may arise between Taliban and Pakistan because of the Durand line, and what are the options that are available with India going forward. First up, let's understand what is this Durand line issue that has been persisting between Afghanistan and Pakistan. When we go through the history books, we have two great empires. One is the Soviet Union, we have the Russian Empire, we also have the British India Empire. What did these two powers want? They were the colonial powers. They wanted to capture land. On one side, you had the Soviet Union, which wanted to capture, expand its reach. On the other side, we had the British India, which also wanted to control large swathes of land as well. So what happens? You had Afghanistan, which was acting as a buffer. Buffer between whom? One is the Russian Empire, the other is the British Indian Empire. So Afghanistan was acting as a buffer between the Russian Empire as well as the British India. So we have three parties here. One, the Russian Empire, where we have the Soviet Union, followed by Afghanistan, and finally what we have is the British Empire. All of them wanted to have their own autonomy, and they also wanted to expand on the land control as well. So we have Soviet Union and colonial British, which wanted to control large swathes of land, but British during that period, playing its diplomatic game, entered into a consensus and an understanding with the Afghan rulers. So what exactly happened? The Russian Empire was stopped. British entered into agreement with the Afghan rulers, and so what we have is Afghanistan acting as a buffer between the Russian Empire as well as the British Empire. Back in the year 1893, we had the British civil servant Sir Henry Mortimer Durand and Amir Abdul Rahman. What did they do? They entered into an agreement. This agreement is called as the Seven Clause Agreement. What was this agreement all about? This agreement said that the Afghanistan ruler back then, Amir Abdul Rahman, will have the autonomy. So he was in Afghanistan, he would have the autonomy, he would be able to rule the territory of Afghanistan, but he also said that he has to accept this line that is persisting between Afghanistan and British India back then as the official line called as the Durand line. So what happens? They enter into an agreement. According to this agreement, they say that there will be a presence of a line called as a Durand line, and it is this line that they have to accept. So according to the Seven Clause Agreement, they accepted that this 2670-kilometer line can be accepted as the boundary between Afghanistan and British line. Another important clause in this agreement was clause 4. What was this clause 4? The clause 4 clearly said that we will be respecting these lines as envisaged, and at the same time we would also be respecting the rights of the people who are living in this region. So if you look into this region of Durand line, you have the Pashtuns who are present along the border areas. They are present in Afghanistan as well. They are present in British India as well. Back then it was British India. So their rights will have to be respected, is what was this clause 4 all about. What was the advantage for the British? The advantage for the British during that period was Afghanistan was acting as a buffer, and the Khyber Pass also came under the fold of the British India. But immediately after this, what we see is the 1947 India was broken down into India and Pakistan. Pakistan became an independent country, and that is when this whole conflict starts emerging along the Durand line. What is the issue? We have the Durand line. We have Afghanistan on one side, we have Pakistan on the other side as well. On both the sides of the border, we have the Pashtun community. This happens to be one of the ethnic groups that is present in Afghanistan as well as in Pakistan. So these Pashtuns did not want to give up their land to Pakistan. That is the major issue that immediately surfaced. So after 1947, when Pakistan was to be recognized as a country in United Nations, it was Afghanistan which opposed this very move. Why? Because Afghanistan believed if the historical lines are accepted, Pakistan, which is a new country, will lay claim to the Durand line, which means that some of the regions which was historically occupied by the Pashtuns will ultimately go to Pakistan. So Afghanistan will lose a large amount of area, and as a result Afghanistan did not recognize Pakistan. And with time, to prevent this particular issue from resurfacing, becoming a problem to Pakistan, what does Pakistan do? It starts funding the Taliban forces. So what do we have? During those periods where the government was in picture, we had the government which wanted to take complete control of this Durand line, but since Taliban was being financed by Pakistan, the government and the Taliban were already in friction, and ultimately the Durand line issue was not resolved. So what was Pakistan doing here? Pakistan was creating an environment where the government forces back then, the Taliban which it was financing, ended up fighting each other. So during this period, the Durand line issue did not surface. But now what we have is the Pashtun nationalism that is taking into picture. As a result, you had large number of bullets that were being fired from Afghanistan. This is where Pakistan realizes that in the year 2017, they have to go through this fencing. So what do? Along the border areas of Afghanistan and Pakistan, what they create is the fencing in this region so that they are able to prevent the refugee crisis and at the same time lay claim to this Durand line on a permanent basis. And as a result, we have the spokesperson of Taliban right now who has gone ahead and said that they may relook into this Durand line. Yes, Pakistan has put up the fencing. Yes, Pakistan has laid claim to this Durand line, and in fact, Pakistan wants to make sure that this Durand line is permanent. But we have Taliban right now who says that they may have to look into this Durand line controversy between Afghanistan and Pakistan. What are the options that are available with India right now? Since India is closely watching what is happening between Taliban and Pakistan, India has two options. What are these two options? One, we have to take into picture the human rights violations. There are people who want to establish an independent Pashtunistan, which means this is an ethnic group where the ethnic group will form an independent sovereign territory of its own. So what should India do? During this particular period, India has to closely watch what is happening along the Durand line, and in case there are any grave human rights violations, the same will have to be reported to the United Nations as well. So what should India do? The human rights violation that if it happens along the border areas where the Pashtuns also claim the other side of the boundary along the Pakistan borders, if there is human rights violation, India has to put it to the United Nations, and at the same time, if they require any of the legal and technical assistance, the same will have to be provided by India. So this will be a checkmate game. This will be at the larger geopolitical level. So what are we going to do? We have to intimate the same to the United Nations on the human right violations, and at the same time whatever legal technical assistance is required from the Indian side to the Afghanistan side will have to be provided to resolve the Durand line issue ultimately. So what is that we have to understand here? The dispute over the Durand line is not merely that of the international border, but it is about ideologies. Ideologies of what? One, there is something called as the Pashtun ethnic group. It is not only about religion, but it is more about the ethnic identity. Since the Pashtuns are divided on the Afghan border and also on the Pakistan border, what needs to be resolved is this issue of Durand line so that both the parties, the Afghanistan and the Pakistan, come together to create an atmosphere of resolving this issue. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says noble intentions. This article here is speaking about recent UNSC resolution 2593. What was this resolution all about? This resolution was adopted in the presidency of India, and it was also supported by United States of America, UK as well as France. What was this resolution all about? There are two viewpoints to this particular resolution. One, that there is terrorist activities that is happening in Afghanistan. This should be brought to an end, and there should be no terrorism that is surfacing in Afghanistan. So that's the first objective of the resolution. And at the same time, there are a large number of people whose rights have been violated. One is the women, the other is the children, then there are minorities as well. So their rights have been stripped off, and as a result their rights will have to be respected. So this resolution of 2593 clearly requests the Taliban to ensure that no terrorist activities take place in Afghanistan, and at the same time they respect the human rights, which are the values which are universal in nature, who are present in Afghanistan. Added to this, it further goes ahead and it clearly calls that in case there are people who want to move out of Afghanistan, they feel that it is not a safe haven, they want to move out of Afghanistan, there should be no problems conducted whatsoever by Taliban. So the third objective is it asks Taliban to allow those people who want to leave the country, and ultimately it is directing Taliban not to allow Afghan soil to be used for the terrorist activity. So the UNSC resolution clearly goes on to point out that Afghanistan can become a breeding ground of terrorism in the near future. There will be clash between the terrorist organizations. Yes, the Taliban may take over the rule as well, but this may also give rise to other radical fundamentalist organizations like the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, who already have some clout in Afghanistan. So it is asking Taliban not to allow these fundamentalist forces to take room in this particular region. Further, as part of the humanitarian effort in Afghanistan, we have this resolution requesting the United Nations bodies, its institutions, its implementing partners to be respected so that they can actively engage in providing the humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. As of now, all the rights have been stripped away and there are no organizations of international implementational bodies which are not present in Afghanistan. So respecting these bodies so that they would be able to provide all types of emergency assistance is the need of the hour, says the United Nations resolution of 2593. Despite all these recommendations made under United Nations Security Council resolution 2593, there are challenges and concerns, says this article. What is the first concern? It says that this Taliban regime, which was abhorred by the global community, where rights have been stripped off, is now being given the license to run the government in Afghanistan. So it appears to have accepted the Taliban regime as the default force in Afghanistan, where it would be conducting all the governance activities in Afghanistan. So what has it done indirectly? It has given legitimacy to Taliban to conduct its operations, which means there are no words whatsoever which criticizes the move of Taliban. They have not questioned the accountability regime of the Taliban, and as a result, indirectly, they have supported the Taliban regime is the concern under this article. Therefore, in the near future, if the global community has to have some control in Afghanistan, they have to ensure that they keenly watch on the progress of the government formation, who will be part of the cabinet, what will be their work, what will be their agenda, what is the rights that they want to give, what are the legislations that they bring about. All this needs to be closely monitored, and at the same time the Taliban regime will have to give a commitment to the international principles. If they do not comply by these international principles, they should not be allowed to get the funds and their assets should be frozen as well. So India has to wait and watch in this particular game, but continue to talk with Taliban indirectly on the world stage and bring all other powers so that this issue in Afghanistan is ultimately settled. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says breakthrough challenge. The article here is speaking about the vaccines administered to the people, and in spite of these vaccines, there is issue of breakthrough infections that are occurring, says this article. When we look into the statistics, as of now, India has vaccinated about 66 crore people, out of which more than 50% have been given the first dose and more than 16% of the people have also been given the second dose as well. But in spite of these vaccines being administered to the people, there are few cases where the COVID-19 has been reported in those people who are already vaccinated, is what is this article all about. If we take the example of Kerala, Kerala state is one of the states that is witnessing a large scale infection. Kerala also happens to be one of the states which also has a large number of people who are vaccinated as well. So they are the ones who are reporting new infections. They are the ones who are already vaccinated as well. So now the question is, what is this breakthrough infections? When it comes to India, we have two vaccines. One is Covishield. The other happens to be Covaxin. When it comes to Covishield or the Covaxin, we have two doses that a person will have to be given. So any person will have to be administered two doses. If a person is administered second dose, we waited for 14 days, and after 14 days, after the second dosage, if the person is infected with the COVID virus, that is what is called as breakthrough infections, where a virus is able to break through the vaccine structure and infect that person, is what is called as breakthrough infections. So what is breakthrough infections? After the second dose or whatever doses as originally envisaged by that manufacturer, if it is given and after the vaccination is well, if the person gets infected by this COVID virus, that is what is called as breakthrough infections. If we look into number of surveys and studies, one of the studies says the CSIR studies have found that nearly a quarter of 600 fully vaccinated care workers were reinfected, which means 25% out of 600 people were reinfected, and these are the people who are fully vaccinated, which means they've been given the two doses. The CMC Vellore and Pigmer Chandigarh too have reported between 1 to 10% of fully vaccinated health workers have been infected as well. So it means that in spite of the vaccination, people are getting infected as well. But one of the advantages is it is not severe in nature. They need not be hospitalized as well. All that they have is few symptoms which can be done away with without much hospitalization. But now there is increasing number of cases that we are witnessing in India. That is primarily because of the large scale variants that have come up, says the author. Because there are large scale variants and these variants were not originally taken into picture by the vaccine manufacturers, what we require is a booster shot. So the article here recommends that going forward the government will have to come up with a booster shot strategy, or if there are companies which are already given permission and if this company is in the process of conducting their vaccination strategy, in such a case the manufacturer of this vaccine will have to add the variants into its vaccine structure. So going forward, India, which is the vaccine hub of the world, which is the pharmacy of the world, will have to increase the number of doses it is able to produce in a single day, and at the same time we have to ensure that there is a booster vaccine, and at the same time we also have to ensure companies which are already given license bring about a change in their structure, is what is this article all about. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says a hydro onslaught the Himalayas cannot take. This article has been explained in the past 1 week. We did discuss about the landslide issue. We did discuss about the hydropower projects as well. We did discuss about the ecological flow when it comes to the projects. We have discussed about the committees that were appointed, how the government has given permission to the projects in this region, and how it can be catastrophic in the near future as well. So this article in simple terms says that in spite of the repeated lessons, we have not learned our lessons, say this article. Ideally, whenever there is a tragedy that is struck, we have learned our lessons. The government should have made sure that such projects do not take place in the Himalayan region. But in spite of the reports, in spite of the IPCC saying that we will have large scale issues because of climate change as well, the government continues to engage in such an activity which could be disastrous for this region, says this article. So basically the hydroelectric projects or large scale infrastructure projects which is taking place in this region should not have occurred, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. How should India look at dispute between Afghanistan and Pakistan in the context of Durand line? What do you understand by breakthrough infections? Evaluate the protection offered by the existing vaccine and suggest measures to reduce further COVID-19 spread. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.